What happens when a simple rental agreement turns into a night of unexpected passion? In the quiet intimacy of a Portland home between a landlord and tenant, amidst loneliness and desire, a connection sparks waiting to unfold. A story that changes everything in one breathless evening. Before I reveal the night that broke every rule, take a deep breath. If you've ever felt desire ignite in the most unexpected places, hit that subscribe button. Some stories are too intense to keep quiet. When I rented out the upstairs apartment, I wasn't looking for anything more than extra income to cover the mortgage. The house, a charming Portland craftsman, felt too big for me alone after my divorce. Honestly, I liked the idea of having someone around even if they technically didn't live with me. When I met William, I knew he was exactly the kind of tenant I needed. At 56, he carried himself with a quiet strength, his salt and pepper hair catching the light, his strong hands hinting at a life of hard work. His polite, gentle demeanor put me at ease instantly. His warm smile felt like a promise of something safe, yet dangerously inviting. He worked mornings at a bakery in downtown Portland with a calm presence, like he'd seen enough of life to never be rattled by it. His steady confidence was magnetic, a quiet allure that lingered in the air. He moved in the following weekend, and from the start William was thoughtful. He brought me fresh pastries every Friday morning, still warm, flaky, and slathered with butter. Perfect extras, he'd say with a grin, his hazel eyes twinkling as if I didn't know he was going out of his way for me. He fixed a leaky faucet without me asking, cleaned the gutters after the first big Portland rain, and even helped me assemble a bookshelf I'd bought on a whim. And oh, the way he smelled like fresh bred coffee and something woodsy, maybe cedar. Every time I passed him on the stairs, my stomach fluttered a little. A spark I tried to ignore, a whisper of something I hadn't felt in years. At first, I didn't think much of it, just harmless attraction. It had been years since I'd been with anyone, and William was so mature in the best way. He wasn't flashy or trying to impress me. He was just kind, capable, and undeniably attractive. But then, one night, I caught him in a tank top fixing the garden gate. His broad shoulders glistened with sweat under the soft glow of the porch light, his muscles flexing as he worked. I couldn't stop staring. That's when the tiny spark of attraction turned into something more primal. A hunger I hadn't acknowledged in years stirring deep within me. That's how I found myself nervously setting the table on a Friday night, my heart pounding with anticipation for the dinner William had asked about earlier that week. His eyebrows had lifted slightly, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, as if he hadn't expected the invitation. Just a small thank you, I'd said casually, though my intentions were far from innocent. I wore a simple black dress, nothing too obvious, but enough to remind him I wasn't just his landlord. The fabric hugged my curves, a subtle tease that made me feel alive. When he walked into the dining room that evening holding a bottle of red wine, I knew I'd made the right choice. His gaze lingered on me a moment too long, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. We ate, we drank, we laughed. William told me stories about his time at the bakery, how he'd learned the craft from his grandmother, and the small joy he found in working with his hands. There was something so calming, so grounding about him that I almost forgot my plan. As dessert neared its end, a peach tart he'd brought as his contribution, I leaned back in my chair, my heart thumping in my chest. The soft flicker of candles on the table cast warm shadows across his face. I couldn't pretend anymore. "William," I said softly, my voice steady despite the nervous buzz under my skin, "do you want to stay a little longer?" I wasn't sure how he'd react, But when he stood crossed the small distance between us and kissed me firmly with the confidence only an older man could have, I knew I was on the right path. His lips were warm, deliberate, igniting a fire I hadn't felt in years. "I want you," he whispered against my lips, his voice low and rough, sending shivers through me. When we finally made it to the bedroom, my heart was racing, my body buzzing with anticipation. William didn't rush. He stood at the edge of the bed, watching me with deep, burning eyes that made me tremble. The Portland night was quiet, outside the only sound the faint patter of rain against the windows. "Undress for me," he said, his voice low but commanding, his hands on his hips. I wasn't used to being told what to do in the bedroom, and it sent a thrill racing down my spine. My hands shook as I reached for the zipper at the back of my dress. Slowly, I slid it off my shoulders, letting the fabric pool at my feet. As I stood there in just my lace underwear, his eyes darkened. "Beautiful," he whispered, stepping forward and trailing a finger down my arm. "Lie down," he said, guiding me to the bed, his movements unhurried, like he wanted to savor every second. His lips traced a path from the corner of my mouth to my jaw, lingering just below my ear, each touch deliberate. His hands explored with a tenderness that made me feel both vulnerable and cherished. When we finally came together, there was no rush, just a steady rhythm that felt like a wordless conversation between us. William moved with a quiet intensity, his hands holding me like I was something precious. The connection was deep, emotional, and overwhelming in the best way. When it was over, I lay there breathless, thinking surely that was the end. But William wasn't done. As I lay on the bed, my body still humming from our first encounter, William's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Come here," he said, his tone a mix of warmth and command. I sat up, and before I could process what was happening, he lifted me, settling me into his lap. His strong hands held me steady, my knees brushing his thighs. The closeness was exhilarating. When he kissed me again, it was deeper, hungrier. His lips moved down the side of my neck, pausing at the sensitive spot where my pulse raced. I shivered as his hands slid up my back, pulling me closer, until there was no space left between us. This time his movements were more urgent, his grip tightening on my waist as he guided me. There was a push and pull, a rhythm that built steadily until I couldn't hold back anymore. My hands clutched his shoulders as a wave of emotion and sensation crashed over me. When it was over, I rested my forehead against his, thinking, surely this was the end. But William still had that spark in his eyes. The night wasn't over. When William reached for me again, I was certain my body couldn't keep up, but his steady presence gave me a new surge of energy. As he guided me to my knees, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders, I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Trust me," he whispered, his voice soft but sure. His lips found the nape of my neck, and I melted under his touch. His hands slid down my sides, holding me in place with a strength that felt grounding. Each movement was deliberate, his body connecting with mine in a way that was both intimate and thrilling. The moment was full of energy, but never rushed or careless. His lips returned to my shoulder, planting soft kisses as his hands kept me steady. I could feel the tension building between us, each movement pulling me closer to the edge. When I finally collapsed onto the bed, my body trembling from the intensity, William leaned down and kissed the back of my hand, his warm breath on my skin. I was sure I couldn't move another inch, but he wasn't done. He pulled me into his arms, his touch gentle yet firm. "Let's take it slow," he said, his voice full of tenderness. He held me close, his body pressed against mine. As we lay side by side, his fingers brushed a strand of hair from my face, and I couldn't help but marvel at the care in his touch. When he kissed me, there was no rush. His lips lingered on mine like he wanted to memorize the moment. There was a quiet intensity in the way he held me, his hands tracing soft lines on my skin. Each kiss felt like a whisper, a reminder that this wasn't just passion but connection. I let myself get lost in the rhythm of it, the steady warmth of his touch, the way his breath mingled with mine. When we reached the peak, it was gentle, like waves lapping at the shore. The first light of dawn began to filter through the blinds, casting a soft glow across the room. I was utterly exhausted, but when William touched me, his touch so tender I couldn't say no. He pulled me to lie on my side, his arm circling my waist, and kissed the nape of my neck softly. Just one more time, he whispered, his voice a gentle promise. This time there was no rush, just a reverent feeling. His hands rested lightly on my hips, guiding me in a way that felt both firm and safe. His lips brushed my ear, his breath warm and comforting. As we moved together, the world outside melted away, leaving only the quiet intimacy of the moment. When we reached the end, it wasn't with fireworks or fanfare, but with a deep, satisfying sense of connection, like we'd shared something far greater than the sum of its parts. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the blinds and the smell of coffee filled the air. My body ached in the best way, a reminder of the incredible night we'd shared. I found William in the kitchen, humming softly as he flipped pancakes. He turned when he saw me, his face lighting up with a boyish, warm smile. "Morning," he said, handing me a mug of coffee. I took it, my fingers brushing his as I smiled back. Morning. As I sat at the table sipping my coffee and watching him move around the kitchen, I felt a deep sense of peace. William wasn't just a tenant anymore. He was something more, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't regret a single moment of the night before. Desire doesn't always look like what we expect. When have you found connection in the most unexpected moments? Share your story below, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's celebrate the unexpected twists that change our lives.